from the perspective of our daily life, how can somebody practice this idea of unconditionality? So the first thing that came to my mind as a representation of unconditionality would be space. Space would represent the idea of unconditionality. Why is that? Because space is unimpeded, transparent, and also space carries with it a certain radiance, a radiance that is not really visible from the physical eye, but is non-dual with space. So the idea of unconditionality, for instance, with space for a inner practice, there are 3 steps. The first step is realization. You try to realize this idea of space. What is space? And try to identify
You just, Alex, you are mute. You just muted yourself.
Alex,
There you go.
No, I was on mute. I didn't mute. Oh, that's all right. Anyway, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can. I'll tell you what, I'm going to mute everyone, and then I want you to unmute yourself, okay?
Mute everybody, and then I unmute myself. Okay.
Correct. Here we go. Okay, I'm so sorry about that.
Okay, so now what I was trying to bring up is the practice of space carries 3 steps, maybe many more, but we'll just look at these 3 steps for now. And the first step is realization, the inner realization of space that is unimpeded, unconditional, and omnipresent. And then from that realization, then you bring familiarization with it. And familiarization, it's a term that carries the meaning of meditation. Because if you look also both in Sanskrit and in Tibetan, the word for meditation actually means, the literal translation means to familiarize yourself. You're familiarizing. So you, through space, to the realization of space, you familiarize yourself with space. And familiarize yourself with space means you are imbuing your mind with it. So your mind becomes soaked with the idea of space. And when the mind becomes soaked with the idea of space, the mind becomes spacious. The mind becomes unconditioned, and the mind becomes omnipresent. So that's the beauty of the practice of space. And the third one of these steps is conviction. Through realization and familiarization arises a profound conviction in the strength of the practice, in the strength of what space brings to the life of the students. Because if we look at our mind and we look at the patterns of our mind, we would say karmic habits, karmic patterns that we carry with us. It's very easy to notice that the karmic habits could be crystallized. They're crystallized patterns in the mind. And that's why we repeat things over and over. And sometimes there's very little creativity. The crystallization occurs, some people call it reification. You reify, we reify our patterns, our way of thinking, the way that we are attached to, a certain kind of pattern and idea. So that reification and that crystallization blocks the idea of space. So whenever something occurs, if the mind is crystallized, the mind identifies completely what happens and collapses into let's say, the problem, the crisis, or whatever it is. There's no space in the mind to see beyond that. So the practice of space allows for the mind to be very, very spacious, of course. So if a crisis arises, your mind is bigger than the crisis. So you don't collapse into the crisis. And by the mind being bigger than the crisis, and since space is coextensive with the radiance of space, and radiance of space means the aspect of creativity, the aspect of wisdom, then the human that can sustain that spacious aspect of the mind can find creative ways of dealing with situations during the day. And that is very important, because the pattern that was crystallized due to habits, due to reification and attachment, through the process of practicing the space, the vastness of space, and that radiance that space carries with it, that radiance is inoculated in the patterns, and the patterns become like rainbows. And the rainbow, the beautiful thing about the rainbow, except the beautiful colors of the rainbow, but also the rainbow appears, but it's not really there. If you go under the rainbow, you can't see it. So the same thing with our patterns. If you bring the radiance of space and you inoculate the radiance of space into our patterns, our patterns become like rainbows. They appear, but they're not really there. And what does it mean? It means that you can function beautifully during the day because the pattern is there. So you can function during the day. You can go to work. You can deal with your children. You can go to the bank, etc., etc. You're not spaced out. The pattern is there, but the pattern is like a rainbow, appears, but it's not really there. What does it mean for us that it's not really there? It means that you're totally free. You're able to function, but at the same time, every moment of your awareness is fresh, 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 because the pattern is like a rainbow. It appears, but it's not really there. The fact that it's not really there, it means that it comes from causes and condition. And so it does not exist inherently and completely on its own in the mind of the practitioner. So this union of the radiance of space with everything that we do allows for the student to, or the human, to face life at a level of radiancy and spaciousness, indissolubly non-dual. The spaciousness, in a sense, is the aspect of compassion. That spaciousness is the dynamic energy of compassion, because it allows to embrace everything. And the radiance of that space is the aspect of prajna, the dynamic energy of prajna, that profound wisdom that cuts through all the crystallization. So again, that analogy with the rainbow, it's very beautiful, because the different colors of the rainbow are the different colors of our creativity, but they're fluid. We don't get stuck in any of them. They appear, but they're not really there. So, and that's what space brings into our let's say meditation, and to be able to sustain that during the day implies, of course, training is the stability of the mind, so that whatever occurs, immediately your mind is very spacious, and at the same time you're able to neutralize it due to this the radiance of space, which is the dynamic energy of wisdom and compassion, indissolubly non-dual. So in a sense, that brings you to a process of unconditionality in every little thing that you do. You could be cooking and you're totally there, present, because the pattern is there. But the pattern, being again like a rainbow, allows you to be completely spacious, not spaced out, but spacious, intelligent, alert, but also creative, compassionate, wise, etc., etc. So that's why this idea of unconditionality connected with space, it's something that we can bring in, and let's say we can practice it. And another thing that occurs if we observe, ourselves and the different reactions, the different things that occur during the day, and then you start asking yourself, how am I doing? During the day, we can go through so many different states of mind, of consciousness. And that idea of to be able to see, how am I doing? What should I bring in? What would balance this moment of a certain emotion? And most of the time, space will be the ingredient that you want at your own fingertips all the time, because it's the universal ingredient that is able to dissolve a lot of the problems that we may encounter. Because one thing for sure, if we observe profoundly our mind, you see that the world that we live in comes from karma and klesha. Karma, everybody knows what it means, action. Kleshas, the mental afflictions. So the world that we are familiar with is the product of karma and klesha. Now, the question is, the kleshas, in order to exist, the mental affliction, in order to exist, they need a host. They need to ride on a host. And this host is provided by what we call the conceptual mind. I'm not trying to denigrate the conceptual mind, not at all. It's a very useful tool, but it has a lot of, darker aspect. And one of the darker aspects of the conceptual mind is that it's the host for clashes. So, and what occurs when a klesha comes up and you observe, let's say, jealousy comes up. And if you observe yourself as jealousy comes up, two things occur. The first thing is reification. We reify the object of our jealousy. And then immediately there is identification. So the reification makes the object a target. Now I have a real physical target in front of me. And when there is a target, then you have identification with it. And with identification comes grasping. So you have these three processes: reification, identification, and grasping. Now, the process of practicing space dilutes the first one, which is reification, which is the first big problem. Reification means crystallizing, concretizing, right? So the injecting space in the practice, what it does, dilutes reification. Once reification is weakened, then the identification with it is weakened. And once identification is weakened, grasping is weakened. And if these three are weakened, the klesha is weakened. The mental affliction doesn't have the range and the power that it usually has when reification, identification, and grasping are very, very strong. So those are all things that, we don't have to believe it. It just by observation. If somebody observes his or her mind seriously and for a long, long time, those are things that you'll be able to identify and discover. And once we identify and discover, then we need a strategy. What do I do with what I discover? And thank goodness for all the yogis, the great practitioners of millennia, because all I share is not mine. It was taught to me. It was taught to me by a lot of Western teachers, Eastern teachers, so I'm just sharing what I was taught. And so that's the great thing, to be able to see there is a lineage of great teachers and they all practice, and through the millennia, they perfected their own inner telescope, their mind, and then they offer to the students, the pearls of the things that they discover. And one of the greatest pearls is the radiance of space, the practice of the radiance of space, because that is really the key to live a life without conditioning. Because the mind tends to be conditioned. It would be like a snowflake. Again, this is something that I was taught. Our patterns in the mind, it would be like a snowflake. Beautiful geometrical patterns, right? A snowflake has a beautiful geometrical patterns, but those are our pattern in the mind. But through the process of meditation, and you unconfigure that mind. The mind that was configured and produced that beautiful snowflake, through the process of the practice, you unconfigure that snowflake, and then snowflake becomes a drop of water. That's the mind that is unconditioned. The conditioned mind is the snowflake, and the unconditioned mind is the drop of water. Now, this drop of water then gets conditioned again due to karmic winds, propensities, samskaras, many things that we all learn from Patanjali and other great yogic manuals. So in a sense, we could say that from a relative point of view, we experience unconditionality every night we go to sleep. When we go from waking, then dreaming, and deep sleep. In deep sleep, we experience a relative. I want to stress relative because it's not the ultimate unconditionality, because deep sleep is still imbued in some kind of very subtle ignorance. For ultimate unconditionality, you need to go to the fourth state, which is Turiya, and has many degrees in it. But the Mandukya Upanishad calls Turiya the self. Turiya is Atman. So in a sense, Turiya is that ultimate state of unconditionality. But for us, every night we go to sleep and we enter into deep sleep, we experience a relative unconditionality, because the mind that was conditioned and configured of the day, a male mind, American, Mexican, European, a mind that has had, a family history, etc., that mind is slowly dissolving into a layer of mind that is not human, and that is not Mexican, Italian, American, or whatever, male or female. That mind is dissolved. Now, that mind becomes the drop of water. So you go from the snowflake mind, which is the configured mind during the waking state. Then you enter into the sleep state, and your mind is a little more subtle, and the configuration of the mind, it starts slowly melting, but it's still there. The pattern is still there, because there is still a lot of ahankara, I and mine. That's why in dreams we can scream, we can cry, etc., etc. There's a lot of attachment still to that person that is dreaming. And then you finally enter into deep sleep. That conditioned mind, configured mind, dissolves back into the drop. And then if you break through the deep sleep and you enter into Turiya, then you have that famous saying, the drop goes back into the ocean, but also the ocean goes back into the drop. Turiya is both way. It's not just the drop dissolving into the ocean, but the ocean dissolves into the drop. That's the beauty of Turiya. You have this non-duality of the ocean and the drop. So that's a little bit this idea of unconditionality, how to practice it, in daily life, and how it corresponds, to the idea with space. Okay, now let's go a little bit to the text, because our time goes by really fast, and we want to have plenty of time for question and answers and comments and ideas. So the text that I picked, it's not a beginner text, but here everybody is such a profound students of theosophy or of other things. So it's the essence of Chetsun, one of the greatest yogis in the ancient Tibetan tradition. And the teaching are presented by Longchenpa, and some of you might not know who Longchenpa is. You can Google it, and you'll be amazed that he was called the Omniscient. Oh yeah, you see the title, Omniscient Longchenpa, because of the immense knowledge. And he was also this incredible being that united. He was a profound yogi, but also was a pandita. He had a profound knowledge of all the different tantras and everything. But anyway, you can look it up if you're interested. So the main verse, the main text, I just took a little sample of the text. But the main text says, fully sustaining these three sacred principles. Now, so here we go straight into the practice of space, of unconditionality. So the first thing that you want to do is the cultivation of bodhicitta. And bodhicitta for theosophical students is very similar to the union of buddhi manas. So you have that union of buddhi and manas. And the translation that the Dalai Lama often gives of bodhicitta is the mind of enlightenment, of infinite altruism. So you see, it's right in the realm of theosophy as far as the first object and the first fundamental idea, that immense unity, the infinite altruism. Nothing is left outside. So that's for preparation. When you prepare to meditate, that's your motivation in meditation. Your motivation is, I'm not here for myself. It's not about me. I want to improve my mind so I can be better or I can have less stress, but we're improving in order to be able to better help and help everybody. That's the idea of infinite altruism. So that's the first step in meditation. You prepare the motivation. What is your motivation? And for these highest teachings, you cannot have any other motivation but bodhicitta. You cannot have any other motivation but infinite altruism. So that's your motivation for the beginning of the meditation. Then you have the engagement in the meditation, and here the engagement goes engagement with non-conceptual awareness during the actual practice, and that is the main thing of in a sense is the engagement with non-conceptual awareness. That's the unconditionality. That's the ultimate unconditionality. The relative unconditionality was the dissolution of the mind that was a snowflake into the drop. That's relative unconditionality. The ultimate unconditionality is to cut through that layer of deep sleep, enter into turiya, and then the engagement with the non-conceptual awareness. The drop has dissolved into the ocean, but the ocean is also dissolved into the drop. That's that non-conceptual awareness. And that's your actual practice. That becomes the practice. Or in my case, which because I'm not at this level, in my case would be the best approximation of non-conceptual awareness, the best approximation that I can get close to it. And then you end the practice with a dedication. You always dedicate everything that you do for the benefit of all sentient beings. In a sense, you are putting two bookends in your practice. The first bookend is the motivation. The second bookend is the dedication. And in the middle, you have your practice. So you can start your day even like that. You can start your day with the for many theosophies could be, the pledge, the Kuan Yin pledge. All theosophies are familiar with that. So that could be the motivation, how we start our day. Then we have our practice during the day, all the things that we do. Then, it doesn't have to be meditation sitting. It could be, Judge calls it life meditation. So whatever we do, we carry with it we try to maintain a peripheral understanding and realization of non-conceptual awareness, which would be the best approximation of it would be space. And then we end our day by dedicating the merit. You dedicate everything that you did during the day, you dedicate it for the benefit of all sentient beings. And this very simple practice will lead practitioners upon the path to liberation. What does it mean? Liberation doesn't mean that, oh, bye-bye, everybody, I reached nirvana and forget it. No, you free yourself from the mental afflictions. You finally become, in a sense, a Buddha, or become a Jiva Mukta. You've become somebody that is free, but is free from the mental afflictions, so you can help others more effectively. You're not abandon anybody because your motivation is infinite altruism. But at the same time, you're not subject to the mental afflictions that everybody is subject to. So you are in what they call non-abiding nirvana. Your mind is in nirvana because you eliminated all the mental afflictions, but you do not abide in nirvana because your immense compassion keeps you connected with all sentient beings. So you have this very profound level of awareness. And so here's a few comments that Longchenpa writes. It says, as this quote reveals, all virtue acquire on the peerless Mahayana path. Many of you might know Mahayana means the great vehicle, the great Mahayana path, the path of Tsongkhapa, the path of Chandrakirti, Nagarjuna, that's the great Mahayana path, stands from these three sacred principles. That's why it's called Mahayana. All of you are familiar with the voice of the silence, with the path of Paramita. That's the path of Mahayana. That's why they're sacred principle. And the three sacred principles, as we read, was bodhicitta, non-conceptual awareness, and then the dedication. That is why one must cultivate bodhicitta from the onset and maintain an even state of pristine awareness that transcends any reference point or conceptual orientation during the actual practice. This is our best approximation of it. Unless somebody is already a great yogi and can enter into that instantaneously. But if you're like me, that I'm just a beginner, that is a process. And the more we practice, the better we get at it. And again, our best helper is the idea of space, sustaining every moment the idea of space, and observing yourself when the mind collapses into a fixating or obsessing on a thought. And if you can catch yourself and then inoculate the radiance of space, what occurs is what used to be an obsessive thought now becomes that which frees you from the obsessive thought. Because there's no two, right? It's just no two. It's not two different realities. That which was obsessive thought, through the inoculation of space, is the same thought, but now the radiance of that thought arises non-dually. So the chain now becomes that which liberates you. And that's the beauty of the no two process of realization. Then in the last little paragraph says, from the perspective of the path of original purity, that original purity is ultimate space. It's called original purity because nothing can destroy, or nothing can degrade it. Nothing can do anything to it. That's why it's called original purity. Also because it never really manifests. It's unmanifested. That's why it's original purity. Or the great perfection, that is another name for Dzogchen. Cutting through to original purity means to rest in the awareness. And that's the process of cutting through. And some of us become very, very skilled practitioner in meditation, we will be able to cut through the state of deep sleep. Because when we enter in deep sleep, our mind usually faints, or at least I should say my mind. I cannot talk for everybody because I don't know where everybody is in their own practice. But my mind faints because I'm not very well trained. And so I enter into deep sleep and I'm totally unaware of it. But through the process of training in meditation, you enter into deep sleep consciously so that you can garner the information, let's say, or whatever arises spontaneously in deep sleep, and then you can bring it back into daily life. And if you're a very great practitioner, you can cut through deep sleep, that state of deep sleep, and penetrate the fourth state. And if you penetrate the fourth state, then you rest in that awareness. And that awareness is an elaborate nature of all appearances. So for you, when you're resting in the fourth state, Turiya, everything is pristine awareness and luminous displays of pristine awareness. It's like the ocean and the waves, right? The ocean is pristine awareness and the waves are the displays of pristine awareness, indissolubly non-dual. So for the practitioner who is able to stay in that unelaborate state, which is also another synonym for unconditioned state, unelaborate state, unconditioned state, the nature of all appearances, and thereby you transcend fixation upon compounded phenomena. Compounded phenomena are the phenomena that arise from causes and conditions, and that's why they are temporary, they are impermanent. And we tend to fixate on what is impermanent, thinking that is permanent. That's why we suffer tremendously, because things change all the time. But we tend to think, oh, I will always be young. Oh, I will always be beautiful. Oh, I will always have that job. And then things change. Our body is not the way it used to be, our mind, etc., etc. So compounded phenomena tend to dissipate. And if I fixate on the uncompounded phenomena, I build my own home on quicksand. And it's about, it will tumble down. And there will be tremendous suffering that goes with it. Also because the fixation, the grasping onto that. So again, this idea of unconditionality connected with unelaborate nature of appearances, and also the idea of space and its radiance, they help the human to slowly free himself or herself from the chains of the mental afflictions, the chains of the klesha, so that the world that was created from karma and klesha, we're able to dissolve it. And we bring it back now from the perspective of pristine awareness and the radiance of space. So what was built by karma and klesha now arises spontaneously from pristine awareness and the radiance of space. And if the human begins to move, for you, that world becomes the real world, then universal brotherhood, it's a reality. It's a reality because that heresy of separation that was strengthened by the mental afflictions is gone, because the mental affliction that they were feeding that heresy of separation are gone. So that's, that briefly, what I can present as far as this. I mean, there could be so much more to say, but I think it's good to open to comments, questions, doubts. Again, everything that I say is not the ultimate truth. It's just one point of view, one way to look at it. And also, as I said earlier, nothing is mine. I just share what was taught to me. And hopefully, I was able to present it more or less clearly. But I think would be good to open to comments, ideas, because everybody here is such a profound student. So I think everybody might be able to add points and points of view that might give a more holistic.
My question is really about space. I know when we meditate, we enter into space, and in the Veda, Aditi is the goddess of space and also called the goddess of infinity. So could we therefore say that although we know physical space is finite, and the quasars seem to be the end of our visible universe, about 15 billion light years away, is metaphysical space, which is discussed in the Secret Doctrine and in philosophers like Leibniz, is that infinite? And do we enter into that in meditation?
Yes. What the ancient yogis spoke about 3 kinds of space. The first kind of space was called Maha Akasha, which is the space that we see. We see, that's the space that we're familiar with. Then you have called Chitta Akasha. That's the space of the mind. But then you have the last space that was called Chid, C-I-D, Sid Akasha. That's the space of ultimate awareness. And that is the space that we're talking about. So usually the Maha Akasha is the space that we experience now. Then you have the space of the mind, which is the space that you experience in meditation and in dreams. But then when you cut through the conditioned mind, you cut through that ultimate space, ultimate relative space of the dreamless state, and you enter into the 4th state. When you enter into the 4th state, then you have the space of awareness, pristine awareness. And it's non-dual. They're non-dual. So that depends on the level of the practitioner, because the practitioner may think that reached the 4th stage, but actually you're still in the 2nd stage, because this depends on the capacity of cutting through and how well the practitioner has been taught and the authentic teachings that the practitioners has received. Because, for instance, even in a simple practice like shamatha, well, I mean, not simple, I haven't even achieved shamatha, but anyway, the Tsongkhapa teaches us, right? You reach shamatha, which is samadhi, and your conditioned mind dissolves into what they call a substratum, what they call alaya vijnana, right? The substrate consciousness. But in that moment, we experience non-conceptuality, bliss, and luminosity. This mimic pristine awareness. So if you have not received authentic teaching, you might stay in that jacuzzi of luminosity, non-conceptuality, thinking that you have reached the top. But you haven't cut through alaya vijnana, the reincarnating ego. You're still in that. You haven't really cut through to what we would say in theosophy, the ultimate Atman. So that's why it's important to have authentic teachers, authentic teachings, and authentic practitioners. So you can distinguish between the 3 spaces.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Martin.
Martin
or Susan, I don't know.
It was Susan. I couldn't change the name on there. Usually we have both of ours, but anyway.
Right.
So what you were just talking about just made me think of the stupefying blossoms mentioned in the Voice of the Silence, being stuck on the incredible fragrance of awareness, but yet, common awareness and not moving on. And just thinking of those beginning steps, I just made some notes. When we start thinking, we start looking at our habits and what we do, and we kind of play whack-a-mole, like, oh, I shouldn't do this and I shouldn't do that. But the awareness can and should go even deeper. It's more of a textural thing. Like, why do I have these expectations? So I'm doing this. Why must I do it in this order? Why must I satisfy this need? And that, to me, points to why the the process is constant and, forever in incarnation, because there are so many layers. But anyway, I had a thought about reflecting on other people's patterns, other people's crystallizations and kleshas. Do you have any ideas about that, especially in the beginning? I mean, ultimately, when we go to those depths, we sort out what's true and what's real for ourselves and others. But when we're beginning, we have such an impact from others, ideas and thoughts and kleshas and such. How do those things mesh? And I'm not trying to say, ooh, the terrible things other people do. I'm just thinking from a practical sense.
Yeah.
Any ideas or thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, well, I'm still a work in progress. So I do exactly like that. Sometimes, yeah, as you said, it feels like, it comes from the other person. So one thing you learn through the teachings when you're taught, especially in meditation by these great yogis, one thing that they teach us is to be able to develop prajna, that discerning awareness. So the other person becomes more of a catalyzer. They catalyze things that are already within me. For instance, if I have when we say you push my buttons, right? The button is pushed because I have it. Somebody pushes the button. So the person that pushes the button is the catalyzer for that button to be pushed. But I offer the button. I have buttons all over me. So it's very easy for people to push them. So that in time, we develop the skill of, through prajna, we distinguish between he's a catalyzer, but I carry within me jealousy, anger, etc., etc. So that we might invert the awareness in upon ourselves. And I know that you didn't say that, but instead of going out and thinking many times, especially in couples and when we live, you make me so angry. Why you always do this, right? They probably did it twice or three times, but we say, why do you always do that? That's reification, right? That the finger goes out. So as we become better practitioner, you invert the finger back in and you say, yes, that thing was done, but why does it have to bother me? Why do I have to make such a big deal out of something that it really not big? And yes, the klesha, we kind of, we exchange kleshas all the time. There is an article by HBB, The Transmigration of Life Atoms, I think is the title. And in that article, she talks about, yes, we absolutely, that's why one of the way when we talk about service to humanity is about cleaning our mind. So when I'm with you, I try not to pass my mental afflictions. So by cleaning our mind, we're helping other people too. Because so when I am with other, I don't bring an angry mind, poison mind. You try to bring the best of you. So that's one way of helping humanity. Cleaning, so that let's suppose our mind becomes like an artesian well of goodness, wisdom. So everybody that comes in touch with you is bathed in that artesian well, instead of being bathed in, anger. We know many times people, they're always negative about something. And once you've been around them for a while, then you feel really tired. You feel like, oh God, I have to take a shower because I really feel that I have, So we try to be the opposite of that. We try to be that artesian well, so that everybody that comes in that we touch, are bathed into that artesian well. One point of view. Oh, go ahead, Susan. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I said good points. Thank you, Alex.
You're welcome.
Alex, do you mind changing your camera just a little bit?
Yes, I know. It's just the thing moves and I disappear. Okay, Robert Moore. Robert Moore has the hand up. And then Jim.
Yes, thank you. You correlated space with compassion in the sense that space encompasses everything, and so does compassion. But you also indicated the prerequisite to contemplating unconditional space is compassion or bodhicitta. So I wondered if you could elaborate on this. Would have to think a long time thinking about bodhicitta, compassion for all beings, or does space itself, the contemplation of space generate compassion?
Yeah. One thing I can share is through observation. We start looking into the space, let's say the space of our heart. I'm not talking about the physical heart, the center of our heart. And let's say in meditation, we start observing that heart, that center, and we discover that is immense. There's no end to the space of the heart. But also that space of the heart carries with it a radiance. And the more we sustain that radiance, then after the meditation, I notice, this is through experience, I notice that compassion arises spontaneously. So the more you stay in meditation in the radiance of space, which is non-dual, of course, with compassion, then after the meditation, the pause session, once you leave the cushion, then compassion arises spontaneously. You're more alert. If you see somebody that is struggling with the door, you're there and help them to open the door, or help. I'm not talking huge, I'm not Mother Teresa, right? But I'm not talking huge things, but little things. You're alert of the needs of somebody else. And that, to me, happens through the practice of space in meditation. That's what I noticed through the practice. So that you discover in time, as our mind becomes more and more stable, that space of the heart becomes infinite and radiant. And that radiance is what becomes a dynamic energy, which will manifest as compassion, but also as wisdom, knowing what to do in certain moments, using skillful words, skillful ways to help others. I don't know, go ahead, if you have more comments. That's what I can share. That's what I've seen, through the practice. Go ahead. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Robert.
I don't have any further comment. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you're welcome. A pleasure. Mr. Jim, you have your hand up.
Yes, by the way, that was just a exquisite, beautiful answer that both inspired and clarified at the same time. I have to say that was just, I kind of forgot my question after that, but at any rate, if we make the assumption, which of course you do in Buddhism and Theosophy, that within the conditioned mind, there is the unconditional.
Yeah.
All right. Now, someone approaches me, a friend, and says, Jim, I really would appreciate your help right now on something. At the moment they approached me, I was thinking about doing something that I really enjoyed personally doing. So they make the request, and I say, oh, well, yeah, that's, yeah, well, I guess I could, yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll give you a hand in just a minute or two. That's one response. Now, as an alternate response, they ask me the question, I'm aware that I want to go do something. I take a split second, I say, of course I will. Let's go. Does that then strengthen the unconditional?
Yes,
Than the conditional?
Yeah, that's beautiful. That what you said is perfect. Actually, what you said, thank you for sharing that, because it's a good example of what I was trying to explain about the radiance when we meditate on space, and the radiance of space, and then compassion arises spontaneously. So exactly that, if you find yourself in a situation like the one that you just explained, if you come out from that meditation, you don't even think, you just, of course, I'll be there for you. Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get at, is that we live mostly in the conditioned mind.
Oh yeah. Oh, believe me.
but what the speech seems to me, speech is very important, because
Very
some of the speech is conditional
Yes.
by the emotions and the etc.
Yes.
But if a person can prepare themselves, because you would think part of meditation is what even Thoreau talks about, is that if you visualize in the dawn something of what you can anticipate during the day, and particularly the kind of people that you normally encounter, and then give a forethought of the kinds of things that are liable to arise or be expected, it kind of brings a certain stream of strength, such that when you encounter the situation, in a sense, you're more prepared for it than you think you are, and then you can make an act of will which is right or appropriate, and that strengthens the thread of the day.
Beautiful, beautiful. I cannot add anything to that. Perfect. Yes, thank you very much. That was great. Anything else, Jim?
No. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There is a question in the chat from Miluka, and Miluka asked, can you elaborate about the rainbow bodies in relation to the masters and their radiance? Oh my God, well, that's a very long thing. But yes, Miluka, the idea of rainbow body that we find a lot in the ancient Tibetan traditions, but also you can find it in Christ, when Christ came back supposedly with the body of light. And you can find proofs of rainbow light also in the Hindu traditions. So it's not really limited just to
yeah, I'm in a Zoom meeting. Can I call you back?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay, so the idea, what Miluka says, he says you have great practitioners, and at the moment of death, the body, when they die, they emit this thing called rainbow body, these colors, and they're seen like rainbows in the sky, etc., etc. But the thing that is very interesting about this question, it's not so much the rainbow per se, but is the practice that is done in order for the rainbow to occur when they die. And the thing that they explain, which is unbelievable, is that's why they have this incredible technology in the ancient Tibetans and the ancient rishis, the technology of the mind. In a sense, when the rainbow body is, when they're still alive through the process of meditation and practice, they dissolve the subatomic particles, our atomic particles of the body. They dissolve it into the energy of pristine awareness, and they dissolve their mind into pristine awareness. So the particles are dissolved into the energy. It's called Yeshe Gelun. It's the Jnana Prana. Is the wisdom winds. Is the energy of awareness. So they dissolve the particles of their body when they're still alive in that energy, and then the mind, they dissolve the mind into pristine awareness when they are alive. But we still see them as human beings because we have karmic perceptions. So for us, nothing has changed. But they are not absolutely the way that they manifest to us. So when they die, they really show their cards. They really show the real colors. And that's why you see this rainbow body. But the rainbow body is exactly that, is that dissolution of the old atomic particles into the energy of wisdom, and then the mind dissolved into pristine awareness, indissolubly non-dual. The energy of pristine awareness and pristine awareness, indissolubly non-dual, like we say in theosophy, Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha has no legs but can see, and Prakriti has no is blind but has legs. So Purusha mounts Prakriti. Pristine awareness, Purusha, mounts Prakriti, the energy. So the two are indissolubly non-dual. And these incredible yogis are able to do that dissolution when they're alive.
You adjust the camera.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Alex.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're
you
welcome,
very
Meluka. I mean, there's so
very
much
much.
more, but you know,
I understand.
you guys can investigate more on your own too. But anyway, that's what I can offer for the moment.
Just if you could adjust the camera again, and it looked like Alan Cooley had a question.
Yes, Mr. Allen. Go, Alan.
Thank you. This will be a primitive question, but I just, you mentioned prajna, the discerning awareness, paramitas, and you talked about the crystallized patterns in the mind. And the thought that I had was that before the paramitas become an automatic reflex, until I can automatically respond with discerning awareness and with all those concepts, that wouldn't I want for the paramitas to be a crystallized center in my mind that I filter things through, and that as time passes, that crystallization could dissolve as those reflexes become automatic, and then that would give me more flexibility in my actions as those things become non-crystallized, that I can then react more spontaneously and with more flexibility. Is that concept valid?
Well, I think so. I think so. As you said, as a beginner, I'm a beginner, so I do the same thing. The beautiful thing about the path of the paramita, it's a complete path. It's what they call the three trainings, right? The three higher trainings: Shila, Samadhi, Prajna. So Shila, it's a umbrella term that it means ethics. So all the first four paramitas are under that Shila umbrella. That's the ethical aspect. So that's what we work on. Try to be ethical during the day, etc., etc. But then you have dhyana, and that is the meditation. The meditation, if we practice that, allows for the first four to become a pattern, but not too crystallized, so that we can be ethical, but also flexible. And that is given to dhyana. Dhyana does that. But then we have the culmination of prajna. Prajna is that discerning wisdom. So if we go back to what we said earlier, then the pattern becomes a rainbow. It appears, but it's not really there. So you're going to be able to do everything that you need to do, but completely free from crystallization. But that comes with the practice. We get better at it. And the three, ethics, meditation, and wisdom are interdependent. The more you practice ethics, the better the meditation. The better the meditation, the more prajna will come up. The more prajna arises, the more ethical you're going to be, etc., etc. So they're all interdependent. It's a beautiful dance. The Madame Blavatsky, in the Voice of the Silence, she actually gave us an incredible key for a radical transformation. That Voice of the Silence includes all the three turning of the wheel. It includes the first turning of the wheel, the way it starts. When you talk Edis, that's Pali. That would be the Pali canon. That's the first turning of the wheel. Then she talks about emptiness, and the paramitas. The discerning between the seemingly full and the seemingly empty. I'm paraphrasing really badly. And then she has the paramita. That's the second turning of the wheel. And then she talks about the Vajra soul, right? The diamond soul. That's the third turning of the wheel, the Buddha nature. So the Voice of the Silence is one of these very rare things in which all the three turnings are there. It's a really, for a practitioner, it's a very complete path, and it's authentic. So I think we're very fortunate to have that book in our lineage.
Really, really beautiful.
Martin.
Now it's my turn, Alex.
Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation and the answers so far. They're really, really good. Don't screw
Well,
this.
coming from you, I'm really happy because you are a tough judge.
Don't screw this one up.
Or I probably will.
No, so Alex, I've heard from many theosophists, and I disagree with this in some manner, that by just studying concentratingly in a text, you become that there is no need for sittings, meditation, for you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I kind of disagree with that, but I would like your opinion. I didn't want to tell you I disagree with it, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know.
The fact that you think about something and concentrate, be one with it, can you become prajna, paramita, illuminated? Thank you, Alex. Just wanted to hear that.
Let me say that, I do not know if we become enlightened by just doing that, but I'm kind of with you. I'm not a person of extremes. I'm always about, the middle path. So I think there is a time for studying and contemplation. And that's why in Buddhism, that's why they're so magnificent in their own teachings. They have the union of shamatha and vipassana. Vipassana is analytical meditation. So that is, you go really deep into, let's say you take a stance of Zen, right? You take one of the stances that talks about space, and you put your mind in a state of shamatha, you calm the mind, and then you use vipassana to penetrate. So you use analytical meditation. Vipassana means ask question. That's what analytical meditation is. It's the process of asking question. What is space? Does space have a color? Does space have an origin? What is the origin of space? Where is space now? And where does space go when I go into deep sleep? Yeah, those are profound questions that you ask in Vipassana. And so there is a place for that. But then eventually you drop all that and you rest. You rest and when I say rest, I don't mean you fall asleep, but you're totally alert, but you dissolve all of it into that pristine awareness. Or the best approximation, in my case, the best approximation, because I don't claim anything, I'm not claiming that I know how to do all this stuff, but I've been taught by people who know how to do it and the practice, they're serial practitioners. So you can, when you learn tennis and you play with people that are way ahead of you, and you want to play with people that are ahead of you because you learn. So the people that I was exposed to, they're way ahead of me. But even in my little thing, I can learn a little bit. So that's I would say middle path. Yes, do focus on the text. Yes, but not just that. Not just vipassana. Then eventually, once you cut through, then you rest. It's like they give the analogy of a bird that flaps his wings a lot of times. That's the effort. That's vipassana. That's shamatha, effort. But then you get to a place in which you don't want to move your wings anymore. That's the effortless space. So I think there's room for all of this.
Thank you.
Did I screw up?
No.
We have time for one last question, I would say.
Yes, sir. Who else?
Somebody can just jump in at this point.
I want to ask a question. You had mentioned, Alex, and by the way, I really enjoyed this. Thank you again for another marvelous presentation. You had mentioned once that when you're meditating, that not to dissolve the thoughts into back into the mind because they are seeds. Can you elaborate on that again? I think it's such an important thing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Victoria. Yes, that again, this is not a beginner practice, but in when the yogis talk about the practice, they use a term that might not be familiar with many of the theosophies here. They call it dharmata, dharmata. And dharmata is the absolute nature of phenomena. So, and that's what our mind is in essence, is that dharmata. So they say when thoughts arise and you're meditating, we tend to dissolve them back into the space of the mind. But when we dissolve them back into the space of the mind, then they will come up again, because the space, that's where they go back. They go back into the mind like samskara, right? So every night they cycle back and forth, back and forth. There's a recurrence of the thoughts, recurrence of, so they say the process would be to dissolve them into the absolute space of the nature of phenomena. That's dharmata, because that incinerates the seed of the thought, so that the thought doesn't have a chance to germinate again and come up. But in order to do that, it's beyond my pay grade. It's to be able to distinguish between the space of the mind and dharmata. And that's the process of prajna. That's why we develop prajna. It's such a sharp way that then we can do the distinction. And as you're meditating, whatever arises, then it dissolves back into dharmata instead of back in the space of the mind. But again, we get better at it the more we practice, the more we practice, the more we practice.